was September 5th, 2016, and I had just had my regular age 70 colonoscopy. As soon as I regained consciousness afterward, Dr. Mayes informed me that I had colon cancer. Because my previous colonoscopy was 5 years previous, and nobody had followed up on the discovery of a tumor at that time, my cancer was quite advanced and had spread to the liver. Because there were tumors in at least two places, they classified this as a type 4 cancer. My actual reaction to the news was satisfaction that my suspicion was confirmed, and then a realization that I was going to have to undergo a lot of treatment. I understand that most people, when they hear the diagnosis stage 4 cancer, feel terror. I often felt terror as a child when I seriously thought about dying and ceasing to exist. The idea of me disappearing was terrifying because I felt that the feeling of I was the most basic fact of my existence. But after 55 years of practicing transcendental meditation, abbreviated TM, I no longer feel this way. I no longer feel that my happiness depends on this particular body or mind. Instead, my happiness arises spontaneously, without any particular cause, from simple awareness. I'll probably come back to this point later. For now, I'll just say that there was not even a twinge of discomfort in hearing the news, just a sense of anticipation, looking forward to finding out how this will play out. I've often described the whole treatment time, about 3/4 of a year, as an adventure that I enjoyed, a kind of vacation without needing to travel to a distant land. As an example, at one point, I was recovering from one of my two surgeries in the hospital. My roommate was an older man suffering from peripheral vascular disease who had a bed alarm enabled because of the importance of his getting rest after his surgery. Suddenly, at 3 a.m., his bed alarm blared, and nurses came running past my bed to wrangle his body back into bed. It seems he got it into his head to go out to a restaurant to get a St. Patrick's Day dinner and forgot about his bed alarm. At least that's the idea I got from his shouting. It was a little like watching a movie. When you watch a movie, you get interested in the lives of the people and find them entertaining. Well, that's how I found this event, very entertaining. Fortunately, he recovered nicely in the following days. Another example was when I looked out of my window one night and saw the nearby stadium scoreboard lighted up with a testing video. There was no game that night. The simple and private experience of watching test patterns and little video clips was an interesting change of pace from my daily routine there of eating, walking, and sleeping. You might wonder about pain. Well, yes, I did have lots of times of pain. I learned how to use pain medication so it doesn't just work once and then stop working. But the pain wasn't accompanied by worrying about it or wishing it would go away or any other side effects of being attached to it. Because TM freed me from most of that attachment, I could just be aware of the pain without any of the hatred that I used to have toward it. I could accept the pain and seek medicine whenever I truly reached my level of intolerance to the pain. You might wonder why I didn't get addicted to pain medication during my two surgeries. I think there are two reasons for this. First, I've never been an addict and I've never sought drugs, even before I learned transcending. Second, I took opioids only as a last resort. I enjoyed the experience of being high, but it wasn't at all tempting in comparison to the natural and deeper stability brought by my practice of TM. A friend asked me when the fear of death ceased for me. I really couldn't answer because it's been a subtle transition over a long period of time without any distinct or sudden onset. So, if cancer for me is just a temporary fact about my body, something to take care of but not to worry about, where does the fear of death actually come from? In thinking about this question, it seems to me that it is part of ego, the defensive shell of pretense that we all develop to deal with the stress of the world we find ourselves in. It's just another stress among thousands of stresses that we inherit from our parents and from society itself. And that brings up the subject of stress, the word, limitations in our nervous system that tend to hide themselves, so we are not really aware of them. I define stress as a deadening of the nervous system caused by overloads of experience. It is fundamentally a protective mechanism that filters out the causes or sources of such overloads. An analogy might help. Stress is like the circuit breakers that protect a house from fire. When too much electricity flows in a circuit, such as when there is a short circuit, the circuit breaker opens to stop the flow of electricity in that circuit. In a similar way, if a child is exposed to abuse or a car accident, any overload, at first he or she feels overwhelmed and cries or strikes back. But if the abuse continues, the child's nervous system is deadened, so the child eventually no longer cares or fights back. This is a pathological state, but at least the child no longer consciously suffers. We all are exposed to abuse and other overloads, small and large, so we all build up stress in our nervous systems over our lifetime. Natural stress relief, or NSR, is a deep and unique state of rest that dissolves and eliminates all that stress in a gradual and natural way. In the circuit breaker analogy, it is like resetting the circuit breaker so the electricity can flow again. With NSR, we regain our natural ability to accept life just as it comes, rather than being overwhelmed by it. The deepest stress that most of us experience is sleep at night, the deep sleep and dreaming states of consciousness. These eliminate most of the stress acquired during the last day, but cannot deal with the really deep stresses that have survived for months or years. The proof is the growth of anxiety and other psychological problems with time, the phenomenon of burnout and high achievers, and the large need for psychotherapy by the general population. We are missing transcendental consciousness, the fourth major state of consciousness. Without this state of deep rest, long-term stresses are considered permanent. Psychology considers state anxiety to be a lasting component of personality. And abnormalities taken as being normal, like the fear of death that I discuss here, persist without change. My experience is that transcending deals with stress effortlessly and automatically, that it generates a natural state of deep restful alertness. What is transcending anyway? And how does it differ from just sitting and thinking or paying attention to breathing? In natural stress relief, we make use of a mantra, which is a meaningless sound designed to point inward toward a natural field of silent awareness. The actual mental technique we use happens by itself once we take the right angle of approach, just as a smooth dive from the side of a swimming pool takes place once we learn how to curve our body from the standing position into the dive. The dive itself just basically happens once the preparation is done. In NSR, we learn how to use the mantra to dive within through 6 lessons taken 2 a day for 3 days, right in our own home. Why do we have to follow lessons? Because transcending has been completely forgotten by most of the world's population. It is unfamiliar in our stressed world, and because it can only be reached by effortlessness, it seems impossible when we are filled with thoughts and worries. How does NSR differ from the more popular forms of meditation? Like day is different from night. It actually works. You don't have to hope or guess that it works. It works. It brings peace, happiness, productivity, and freedom from psychological problems and feelings. Medical and scientific research has, through more than 100 published studies, shown unique physiological and psychological benefits from TM. My own study of short and long-term anxiety shows that it worked dramatically to reduce both types of anxiety for all 50 subjects in my study, except for one subject who reported that their father had died during the study period. At this point, you may have noticed that I learned and practiced Transcendental Meditation, or TM. So why am I recommending the Natural Stress Relief NSR course? The answer is that I saw problems with scaling up TM to try to reach a good portion of our suffering world. And I helped to develop NSR to fix those problems while retaining the required and essential instructions for experiencing the fourth state of consciousness, transcendental consciousness at will. The main problem I found was expense. TM course fees are income-based, currently ranging from $540 to $980. NSR was $47. Another problem is the tendency of TM teachers to use Sanskrit words and concepts to describe the practice of TM and its positive effects on life. In NSR, there's none of that, just plain English words to describe actual experiences that we can have once we learn the practice of transcending. You are seeing this here in this series of videos. A final problem is the requirement of learning TM from a certified teacher, usually teaching in a center some random distance away, sometimes a very long distance away. In NSR, you do it yourself, learning from a highly praised manual through your own experiences when following each simple instruction. Once you close your eyes, you can only learn from your own experience, not from the words of the manual. This is not a philosophy or set of intellectual ideas. It is your own experience once you know the right angle to take for diving within. The world needs this simple antidote to internal stress, and it needs it urgently now. When I imagine the ideal person who needs to hear this message, I think of a business person, loaded down with responsibilities, too much work, and too little time. I think of the surgeon who works for over a day at a time with the pressure of needing to do the right thing for each patient. I think of the father and mother responsible for raising their child, caught by the conflicting requirements of jobs and the needs of their children. I think of 10-year-olds or 14-year-olds who are old enough to understand such concepts as anxiety, thoughts, and emotions, and who are ready to lead a more fulfilled life if they learn NSR early with help from their meditating parents. I think of poor people caught in the trap of unmarketable skills and unemployment with rising health and housing costs. I think of ministers and religious people searching for God and unsure of how their private lives might be inconsistent with their vocation. I think of people of all ages and backgrounds wanting more out of life than they currently have. The gradual elimination of internal stress meets the needs of every person today. The only prerequisite is being able to find out about NSR and what it can do for them by restoring a needed fourth state of consciousness to their current three: waking, deep sleep, and dreaming. If you, watching this, are experiencing the fear of death to any degree, I would want you to understand from my experiences that the fear of death arises naturally through the stresses we acquire by living in a stressed family and world, and that it can disappear just as naturally if we practice NSR and eliminate those stresses. If you want someone close to you to learn NSR, just learn it yourself and then share your experiences with it. You may find resistance, since the truth is that many promises in a stressed world are fraudulent. Don't push. Just share your own experiences and let them make their own decisions. If you want to learn NSR yourself, click the link to visit the NSR website. Learn all about it. Get your questions answered. Complete the order form and pay the $47 fee. Within a few days, you will receive the course by mail wherever you live. And whenever you fit the course into your schedule, you will begin to experience the refreshment and freedom that comes from dissolving stresses and discovering who you are without them.